Good morning, everyone. Special thanks to all of you who are sticking with us, coming back even on the final day at 8:30 in the morning. We have a wonderful day today. We're going to have 3 papers this morning. We're going to have a paper this afternoon, and we're going to have 2 panels to wrap things up. It is my privilege and pleasure at this point to introduce Professor Zhu Jin. He is professor in the Department of Religious Studies, and he is the dean of the Institute of Jewish Studies at Nanjing University, China. He is president of the China Judaic Studies Association, editor-in-chief and a major contributor of the Chinese edition of Encyclopedia Judaica. He is the author or co-author of many books, including Legends of the Chinese Jews of Kaifeng, The Jews of Kaifeng, China, and Anti-Semitism, How and Why, as well as numerous articles on Judaic topics. In 1995, he was honored with the James Friend Memorial Award. Professor Zhu Jin is going to address us this morning, giving us a response from afar, Chinese responses to the Holocaust. Professor Zhu.
Boker Tov. Like all other participants for this conference, we like, first of all, to thank organizer and Tony and Alex to organize this and invited me. When they invited me for this important conference, they said Allied powers response to the Holocaust. I was going to accept it, but what's my topic? So then it was reminding me, I wrote the article, very short one, 2000, and talk about actually Chinese response to Holocaust based on some materials, and which I'm going to show you today. The article was written not too long, but published in this newsletter. So finally I found a copy and know what I talked about at that time. So this is how I connected with this conference. So decided to have a topic. Not working? Not working, page down? Huh? How to move to next page? Oh, okay. To press this button? I press button, page down, should work. Oh, arrow? Okay. Okay, thank you. So this is finally become the topic or title. I said response from afar. It's really China and Europe were far away. When Holocaust took place in Europe, China was really far away, and this is very few Chinese really actually know this. But however, China as one of the allied powers and the big one in Asia, and it has its response. It has something to do, of course, Chinese not know too many, or Western countries never talk too much about it. There were a couple of reasons. Now, first of all, is like China only at the end of 19th century, beginning of 20th century, started to know about Jews. And information about who are Jews started to circulate it. As a Western country do not really pay much attention to China, because China was very weak country. As we all know, from middle of 19th century to middle of 20th century, China was like a very weak country. Western powers all in China. Actually, Chinese door was opened by Western powers. The British who sent a few gunships to China in 1840 and defeated China in 1842 and made China open for the first time. And in the 20th century, beginning of 20th century, Japanese start to rise and keep an eye on Chinese territory and start to penetrate it. And also in North Russia, you see, already took large number of territories from China. You see, this is the Chinese situation. But however, as during Second World War, in China, we actually talk about anti-Japanese war. It started from officially 1931 to 1945. If the Japanese official took over northeast part of China. Then, of course, the full-scale war against China was started in 1937. So from 1937 to 1945, that's the full-scale war, we said anti-Japanese war, or Chinese concept of Second World War for 8 years. Because in Europe, that's different story. Then we could realize that Japanese took half of the territory of China within 2 years. Chinese government, we said, retreat to Chongqing, you see, as inland city, and then everything else was different. But however, China never surrendered. You see, so that's why during Second World War, United States supported China, keep providing weapons, goods, money to China in order to keep China on the war. You see, not surrender to Japanese. And this is for the good for United States, also for the whole Europe. But however, the Chinese rules were neglected. But there were other reasons because ideology, and after Second World War, China had civil war that Chinese communists won the war and established a new China, which totally shared different ideology. We followed Soviet Union during Cold War. All this made Chinese response. Nobody really studied this. And also, because of this, China stood on the different sides. And when I was young, we grew up without any knowledge about what's happening during Holocaust. Chinese textbook never mentioned it, or if they mentioned it, they mentioned it different way. You see, not like this conference discussed, this is Nazi Germany against Jews based on racism, but we say they are fascists. Fascism is imperialism, capitalism. So that's why we still blame on capitalism. When you blame on capitalism, cause the destruction of Jews, what can you discuss? And so it is the same about anti-Japanese war. So we have different concepts. However, in the last 20 years, as we all know, China started to change a great deal. After the death of Mao Zedong some years ago, China realized its own problem, start to make change. Not only public and people at different level, including top level of communists, wanted to have a change. That's why you heard about Chinese open door policy or reform, which make China as it is today, because of open door policy. When they open this policy and also give freedom to Chinese academia, Chinese academics start to look at this issue differently. And it was during this period, especially in the last 20 years, there's more and more information about Holocaust, and Chinese attitude start to become clear to at least academia, and through Chinese academia to general public. That's what how it happens. As I involved in the Jewish studies, it's a part of we call it Western studies. You see, because I happened to pick up the field and which rarely discussed before, but then it's part of this effort to reintroduce Occidental studies in Chinese higher education. For instance, the very institute we established at the end of 1980s and become the first institution established in the Chinese higher education field. So look at Holocaust. It's one of the areas we pay a lot of attention to. And then that's why when I was able now to speak at this very conference, because I hope more and more Chinese scholars, Chinese voice can be heard. I must say, when I come here a few days ago, we saw this flag. A few flags, this is the flag of China. In China, we emphasize very much, like we hope Chinese government or companies to open in the way to encourage discussions, academic studies, so that scholars could go to the international conferences to give its own opinions. No, not necessarily it's all good for the communists. They will agree, but you don't have to agree because that's an opinion. But give the voice. And voice from China is very important. So that's why today I'm very happy to be here to talk about this. When we talk about Chinese response to the Holocaust, I want to put emphasis on two aspects. One is public level. We say the general public, or actually in China, you have to do it in intellectuals because ordinary people, especially during wartime in the 30s, very few people really could get information directly and far away from European society. It was through Chinese intellectuals who reported, who write about it, you see, and then made reactions. So secondly is official level government. Because when we talk about this very conference, allied powers, the power has to go with government, not individuals. So that's why two areas I'm going to focus on. And first of all, I just want to mention a few actions or activities or events took place in China, which reflects the Chinese reactions from public or general or Chinese intellectuals in particular. So this is being by record. The date was May 13th, 1933, very close, right, to that the Shanghai protest against Nazi Germany persecution against Jews specifically were organized by the organization. Today we could call it non-governmental organization, okay, the China League for Civil Rights Protest. The important things, this protests were organized by Madame Song. You see, Song, which in Chinese we say Song Qingning, three sisters, right? This is the one who married Dr. Sun Yat-sen. You see, she was leftist in the way, but organized the protest. Those Chinese intellectuals who actually went to German consulate in Shanghai was all high-profile Chinese intellectuals at that time, in the 20s, in the 30s. You see, and also Madame Song made a statement which said, organized persecution against the Jewish by German government and fascist party at that time. We use this a lot. If you read any Chinese paper about these events, they use fascist party more than Nazis. And anti-Semitic broods are symbols of retreat of human beings and their culture to the Middle Ages and the darkest days of imperial czars. You see, they refer to this to see this is the way how Chinese top intellectuals perceive the Holocaust or anti-Semitism conducted by Nazi Germany. Then, of course, another event people are familiar with is Dr. Feng Shanhe, a Chinese consul general in Vienna, who issued a visa for over 5,000 for Jewish refugees. And in 2000, Yad Vashem granted him the Righteous Among Nations Award. This very diplomat, but why he act in such a way? You see, I believe he has a lot to do with Chinese concept when he was in China before served in diplomatic position and learned about this. So I just mentioned this. Later, probably I go into this issue. So just present a few facts to show how Chinese react or respond to this. And also another event was about 20,000 Jewish refugees found a safe haven in Shanghai, chiefly from 1937 to 1940. Okay, this yesterday we talked after the conference, Jews did not really have no place to go. Nobody want really accepted to provide this. China becomes the destination for those desperate Jewish refugees who wanted very much to leave Austria or Germany. As a matter of fact, we said this previously after Hitler came to power, that quite few German professionals, doctors, lawyers, engineers, accountants, you name them, came to China. You see, many of them actually came to Chinese society, especially in Shanghai, played an important role, not only survived in the city, but also played an important role, sometimes I said, for the development of Shanghai as Shanghai become a modern city. See, their contribution is very much felt today by Chinese. But this is typically about China served as a safe haven. And also, there's a news report about this event. Not like in the Western countries, probably people have daily report, but Chinese interest. What's the interest? I give you one example. I quoted Shen Bao. That's a paper, one of the two major papers in Shanghai in old time. Okay, this paper was actually involved, published many news, international affair. Another paper they call Da Kong Bao, more domestic issues. So this paper in Shanghai was very popular. That most people get news from it. At that time, there's almost no television, right? No radios, for instance. That's become one of the major sources. But it published about articles, reports about the Holocaust, and shows the opinions of Chinese intellectuals based on the issue of Holocaust. Now, from 1938, November 10 to 30th, within 3 weeks, and we find out there were 41 articles reporting anti-Semitic events in Germany or Austria chiefly. So that largely informed the Chinese, because this information later on become very important, especially people in Shanghai, when they had direct contact with those Jewish refugees who came to Shanghai, lived since then. You see, this is, I personally, I believe is very important. And also, one thing I'd like to mention is what Chinese communists. We did not have much materials about Chinese communist reaction because at that time they are not really as fighting for power and small in number, especially during Second World War. And but this is an event being reported and become very important. It shows the communists, you see, their attitudes, a response to what we call the Holocaust. So in October 1941, there was meetings they called anti-fascists were held in Yan'an, which was the headquarters of the communists. Now we mention specifically Yihua, a Jewish woman, was invited to attend it as a Jewish representative. Now, later I'll show you why I have. Both she and Israel Epstein, who is a reporter, probably Israel Epstein is better known because among Chinese, especially in the last 15 years, he becomes the icon of foreigners who work in China with communists, but he was Jewish. He passed 2 years ago. He passed away. But all his later life were celebrated, like birthday, give you example, was each time was celebrated by top Chinese leaders, either communist chief or president of the country or premier to bring birthday cake to him. And he was on television. Nobody else enjoyed those privileges, you see, but he is Jewish. You see, he's a reporter. So at that time, he was there. So both of them were, by newspaper, elected as a member of executive committee of the Anti-Fascist League after the meeting. Because this is in the record. And who was Yihua? I found out, she was a German Jew, a photographer. Her original name was Eva Steinberg. Then she met Xiao San, a well-known Chinese communist writer and journalist. His position is very hard, very close friends to Chairman Mao, to Zhou Enlai. That's why in Yan'an, but later on he was in trouble. That's another story. But after they met, married, and she took the name, you see, they called Eva Xiao. This is, we say S-I-A-O, the old way to spell Xiao San's family name. So she used his family name, become hers, but she also took a Chinese name. Has nothing to do with this. Two different characters. We show you how a Jewish woman, finally played in China. And then, so if you mentioned Yihua rather than Yehua, better known among Chinese. And there was a story about her, and she was very active, took lots of photographs, and become very, very valuable. You see, and she died in China in the 70s. You see, though her husband died much earlier and humiliated because of the political struggle. But anyway, this is an important issue we could see. Now, I'm going to focus on second aspect. It's governmental role. I give this talk chiefly based on these documents. So these documents were from China's Second National Archive. Okay, they finally sought them out, published, but they said it's a record. This whole document, I do have Chinese with me. When for this conference, I translate them into English and circulated in that email for participants. But it was a very later period. But this is the whole record of discussions of nationalist government in Chongqing regarding plans to allow Jews fleeing from Europe to settle in China. That's a plan, a proposal. We call couple of things to remember Chongqing, because as I mentioned, in 1937, because Japanese aggression or full-scale war against China, Chiang Kai-shek realized there was no way they could stop the march from north of Japanese army, so he moved his capital to Chongqing. Chongqing became temporary Chinese capital, and that's why Chinese legislation officers were there. So that document will pass there, okay? Then within this documents, the documents include probably 10 different departments and things, but the official letters from National Defense Supreme Council for the Civil Service Department of National Government write this. This is the date. It's March 7th. It's already passed it, and they send it. When legislation passed this, they send it to somebody. This is the official date. The original proposal was made by Sun Fu. The title of his proposal is to allocate part of southwest border region as a settlement area for Jews who are wearied and have no home to go. That's a long title for his proposal. Okay? Who was Sun Fu? Now just give a little bit background, okay, because for Chinese, many Chinese will understand. He was the son, the very son, because of Dr. Sun Yat-sen, who was considered father of modern China, who led the revolution, overthrew Qing dynasty, make Republic of China, or later Chiang Kai-shek, his students, become the head of the state. That's him. That's his son. So his father died, but he played an important role. So he served the president of China's legislative body. In China, we call it Legislative Yuan. You see, because according to Dr. Sun Yat-sen's idea to form democratic China or Republic of China in 5 years and one government. That's the whole system. But we use this because the document will show that you would understand what legislative yuan means, executive yuan means. Executive yuan means like government, okay? Or this is a Congress, something equivalent. So he was very important, always had influence because of his father and his personality and then all this. So as a president of Legislative Yuan, made a proposal, you see, and asked people to review it, finally pass it. And what Dr. Sun Yat-sen gave you a couple of more informations, and he was very much sympathetic to Jewish Zionist movement. This is a letter he wrote in 1920s. Later on was considered Chinese Balfour Declaration, because it was after the Balfour Declaration published, those Jews who in Shanghai write to him, ask him to endorse this. So his statement actually become Chinese endorsement for Zionist movement. You see, this is by record. And then we say in Chinese, we say Sun Ke. In English, mostly people use Sun Fu. Now but actually we say Sun Ke, spell his name in Ji, so but it doesn't really matter here. This is what he wrote in 1947, after communists won the war. This is the date, remember, it was in United Nations debate, the petition. You see, then he wrote this to Jews in China to endorse. So we can see he is very sympathetic, and he and his father, of course his family and many other his close friends, that's why he was realized the issue and the suffering of Jews and wanted to do something there, okay? So this is, I quote directly, from his proposal. You read it, there's some kind of information not exact right? But it doesn't matter. But that's what information he had. He has to write in his proposal to tell those members to have discussion and finally approve his proposal. He had to mention this. Not everybody was familiar with this, I guess. So, but he mentioned this, okay? So I'm not going to go. Then he gives specific 3 reasons. Okay, this is general background of Jewish people. Now he said, in Europe, what happened? Okay, follow Hitler's annexation of Austria and the massacre of Austrian Jews, the situation has further worsened. This is one. Second thing he mentioned, because later on you will see this become very important. You see, England wishes to establish a permanent home for Jews in Palestine. Now it's debatable today. At that time, we learned British mandate almost, changed the mind. Yeah, but anyway, but this is important for him to quote this. Then America, because during wartime, Britain and America was strong ally for China, as China recognized the British role since Chinese door was open. You see, we consider Britain was a big power, so influence in China is strong. They use this, okay? So how to show this issue is an important one. You see, then another issue, very specific, come to the situation. I don't know any of you have read anything about it. As I mentioned, about 20,000 Jewish refugees from Austria, mostly, or Germany, after Kristallnacht, escaped to Shanghai. But very soon, that's a problem. He raised the issue. Shanghai is to announce a plan to limit the number of people allowed to the city due to its inability to deal with the large influx of Jewish refugees. That's including, actually documents shows, including then established Jewish community in Shanghai also raised that issue. They said we have to stop the flow because within 2 years, this is much. And those Jews who arrived have no means. You see, those Jewish community have to support them, find a house for them, and provide food, a soup kitchen, all this welfare for them. They realize burden, that's why they raised that issue. So Sun Fu definitely learned about it, you see, and Chinese learned about it. And that's why they're going to stop the flow of Jewish refugees to Shanghai, which was an open city. You see, of course, when we debate that, Shanghai, those Jews went to China. You see, not China really invited them to come or provide visa to them. As a matter of fact, those Jews who went to China because no visa was required. You see, it's free city. If you could afford a boat ticket, normally at that time people travel by boat, not aircraft or by train. You see, those refugees came by boat. If you can afford a boat ticket from Italy, normally you pay in Germany, Austria, you get a boat, then you sail after a month or so, you get to Shanghai, you can land it, can live there. You see, because it's an open city. You see, but anyway, that's the situation was going to stop it. There was other document who shows this discussion. I'm not going to details, but then because of those reasons, okay, he tried to tell his fellow man who are going to vote, discuss, debate about his proposal. This is why he should do it. This way he tried to justify this, his proposal. So one, he used this as national policy. What's national policy? He mentioned follow his late premier, that's his father. His father, later on, will all in Chinese called the name by late premier. Okay, refers his father, Dr. Sun Yat-sen. And so this is, we should assist disadvantaged and powerless nation. This has become later on a Chinese attitude towards Jews. Why they try to provide assistance in time of need. And also here, as I said, Britain, England is very important because they said China was on the war, right, with Japan. And it needs assistance very much. It needs sympathy and support from other Western powers. Now, Britain definitely is the one that believe, because relationship with England and the Zionist organization, or what they believe. You see, this is their belief, sounds like anti-Semitism, right? Jews control the bank, the rich, a few Jews control it. And but that's the way, not only in their mind, I guess even today you ask many Chinese, they still believe so. You see, sometimes I said we overemphasize the Jewish power in that field, but what do you do? They strongly believe it. This is the key idea. So to do this, will in return will help China to save Jews, provide a settlement for those persecuted Jews. In return, will help China. That's the way people or his fellow man could support his idea. Then another way, this is like almost exact translation from that document and what he said at the time about America. So he realized that Americans will support this and also become very important if we win the heart of Americans. You see, we show our sympathy to Jews, and the American will be happy, and in return, they will provide assistance. That's the logic. China become, first issue is a moral issue, becomes a moral obligation, right? This is because the principle, that's the late premier's principle, to support oppressed or weak, persecuted people. But now this has become more practical. And so then also they believe China want to still develop, to build our own nation. The Jewish people have large supplies of financial resources and talents. Especially, they mentioned later on, they will show the talents means those professionals. Chinese need those professional people to build the country to whatever they want. So this is a way with practical issue. So the plan was at the southwest region. Today we say Yunnan province. It's next to Burma, okay? That area. That area, because the mountainous area, were considered real part. Japanese never get to that portion of the country, though they wanted very much, including the Burma Highway connected during the Second World War. Probably you know that, to defeat Japanese and become this. So we were designated an area of land that Jews may reside in, to live there. And also plan to establish a committee to work together with various departments, because the issue involved various departments. It's how to solve this issue or that issue, and then so they form a committee. Okay, this is to, if that could be implemented, they will manage this kind of establishment, or as you said, constructions and of that settlement for Jewish people. And also, that committee is responsible for recruit, because to get Jewish leaders to support it and provide people with the talent. You see, Jews who are able to come here, work here, and so on and so forth. This is the plan. And also, according to the plan, there's 4 points. This is the fourth one. So, to that, that's what they want to do. Okay, to build the country with these people from the front line. Front line means close to the fight, but those rear lines, so it's safe in a way. Then, the various departments, because this is the past, will become the policy of the country, and each department in charge has to respond. The document really listed more than 5 important departments, their response. They have to say what's the problem, how can they can implement it. You see, what kind of problem issue they have. So then let's deal with Jews with the nationality of certain country. Or this is a different way, because at that time the situation was that China gave Western powers extra territorial rights, especially in the cities where the concession exists, like Shanghai, Tianjin, and Harbin, some Hong Kong, and Wuhan, for instance. So those, if Jews hold citizenship from that country, we have to do it accordingly, because we don't want to cause diplomatic issue. You see, so this is what the said means, and also with stateless Jews without citizenship. So they believe it's easier. You see, because those people with country, they were protected by those countries. Those countries enjoy privileges in China at that time, but this is not. So, but they want to, specific plan I show you is what they have in their mind, and also to show you their seriousness to this issue. So this is how to use passport, and finally people, including people without passport, the Chinese embassy or consulate could provide passport for them if they wanted to come to China. You see, very few countries during Holocaust think in such a way. You see, even wanted to provide a passport so that they could enter China. And also with resident status. You see, this is all serious discussion. And they said once they will receive, if they want to become Chinese, this is what it means. You see, so there's a process, they could do it. Once they become Chinese citizens, they should enjoy equal rights and must not be discriminated against based on the race and religion. You see, this is all in writing. Then, job replacement, to find them a job, or to create a job for them, so that they could start to work. You see, this is all this from document to see the publishing, and finally the recommendation from Finance Ministry, and to say how to do this, then including tax-free transport, all these details. So I don't know. I hope I did not use too much time. I go a little bit faster around transportation. And also in this, you mentioned the living standard in China might be not as good as when they used to be. how to solve this problem. You see, all these issues being taken care of. Then this is the time, May 3rd. That is March 7th, I mentioned. Finally, this is from President of not legislation, but executive yuan, okay, government order. Ask people to follow. That's almost 2 months later. It's discussing all this takes about like 2 months. So that's finally, it says, ask people at different level, also different this is departments, ministries, see, and all response from those actual ministries. And then at different levels should be implemented, not only take measures and or report it back to the legislative yuan to see what will happen. But unfortunately, let's go a little bit, the Jewish representative had some discussion with Chinese authorities. I just couldn't find the name. I saw the name, but I didn't write it down. Today I couldn't find it. A Jewish representative from World Jewish Organization had discussion with Chongqing government. He promised by the report will raise money for this. He said if China want to accept it, they want to assist to provide funding. You see, we don't know what happened later. But another newspaper called the German paper in Shanghai, and then reported this, and then not only reported this, also sent reporter to Yunnan, that area supposedly to portion give to for Jewish settlement, to really look at it and look at environment, the temperature, and so on and so forth, and discuss those people, native people, what's their customs, to report it, even to discuss the possibility or job opportunity if Jews go there. So then, of course, unfortunately, it was not really implemented. You see, it's remained as a plan. The failure, fruitless, caused by one is most other people who ever mentioned is that not enough funding. The funding maybe include to pay those Jews to come to that region, because from Europe, they go there far away. If you don't have means, where's the money to provide transportation? You see, also means the funding after they arrive. And also, this is, I believe, not very much widely reported internationally, caused very little attention. So, and also, that place was an unknown place for the Jews. You see, and including actually those we mentioned, 20,000 Jewish refugees went to Shanghai, China, and I learned from YIVO, when YIVO closed its office in Europe, moved to United States, the last book they printed in Yiddish was China. That shows people had no information, very few information, knowledge about China. So they know China become destination, they need information. That's why they print a book. See, a big book about China, history, custom, government, culture, whatsoever. But this is not for Jews, not known. And also worsened situation in China after this. You see, because 1940, this was in 1939, 1940, Chinese situation changed. Very difficult for Western people to get to China. From that area, go to other part of China. Also, the route to China were cut off. That boat used to take those Jewish refugees from Europe to Shanghai, almost cut off. You see, this is but the significance, the importance of that action or proposal, I think is need to take into consideration. You see, if we consider the situation of China in time, you see, but Chinese still was willing to make this proposal, studied it, and different department gives different opinion, and to show like they were very sympathetic to this. Of course, Chinese situation even worse because we mentioned like when they occupied Nanjing, Chinese capital, no government already retreat. We said to Chongqing, but here there's still massacre. How many people die? You see, this is not. This is. So the death toll of the massacre, they look at the number, is bigger than the 2 atom bombs in Japan, and also total number of civilian casualties of Great Britain, France, Belgium altogether. See, but even under that circumstances, Chinese want to still do something. So this is last word, but I want, before I show this, I should discuss that in the proposal, the reasons that give or justification really matches Chinese attitudes, which was formed in the first 20, 30 years of 20th century when Chinese first really encounter with Jews in person, or knowledge of Jewish people, Jewish movement circulated. It matches very, very well. You see, they do not have strange, different idea, but it's very common. And also, there were couple of other things. When I prepared this paper, I found something I want to show you. This is a pamphlet. It's printed in 1945, before the end of Second World War, about Treblinka. It's in Chinese. It was written by Soviet Union writer who write about Holocaust, many stories, first published in Russian, then in 1946 published in English. But this is published before the English version in Chinese, and we find out it was published by Russians in Shanghai, but in Chinese for Chinese readers. It's called Treblinka Hell by Vasily Grossman. I don't know anyone, the Vasily Grossman, very well known Russian writer about was he Jewish? I don't know. Yeah, but I know. But with this, they not only have some real photos about the Holocaust, and also they have cartoons. They put a few cartoons, Hitler, for instance, to show how brutalist. It was printed a few 100,000 copies. You see, to see how this, in Chinese, circulated among Chinese. So Chinese, by reading this response, and recently, last year, there was a book about a German Jews, a doctor family who came to Chongqing in wartime, and his father finally died in China. He survived in China, finally made a movement, immigration to Israel in the 50s. But he married Chinese woman. He wrote his story, which became so hot. So many books, copies were sold, many reviews. The publisher even write to me, asked me to write book review for this. You see, even today you go to Chinese internet website, that advertising of this book still there to see, to show you how Chinese were very much interested in this. Of course, today, this conference, I think is very important for Chinese to understand this, and to understand Chinese not only response and attitudes towards Jews. It's very important for the future between Chinese and Jews. And with this year become the 70th anniversary of end of Second World War, China will do big events, as probably many of you report. And World Jewish Congress is going to have a big meeting in Shanghai about the liberation of Hankou Ghetto. You see, so this is all this event. As a matter of fact, this morning I received a email from Xinhua News Agency. The top editor want to interview me. He said, because it is an important event, we want to write things about Chinese attitude towards Jews during Second World War. He wanted to interview me. So I said, probably not now or tonight or whatever, we'll see. But anyway, for this conference, now this words were said, whatever you interpreted, but this, my feeling, a friend in need is friend indeed. תודה רבה.
Well, all of you, Holocaust scholars of this particular area, I think we've all learned something new in the last 10 or 15 minutes. And pay particular attention to this and start comparing it with British and American attitudes and actions during the same period. Very fruitful area of inquiry, and I'll tell you right now, we're going to go in this direction. So, question? Yes, sir.
Three minor comments. There were similar plans by the Japanese to settle 50,000 German Jews in Manchuria. There was a plan in the Philippines, President Quezon, to settle 10,000 Jews in Mindanao. Minor point that were the place where we are. The document of Sukho 1947 support for free state was obtained by Judy Foxter, who later married Ben Eliezer, who closed the subject of the last point. Two Chinese diplomats, one the ambassador to the UN, the other the Chinese ambassador to Washington, who were very much aware of the problems. In the case of Wellington Koo, he in fact asked the Chinese government to support or finally they
Okay, sir, could you identify who you are, please? Okay, and then,
Yeah, that's. I think that's very true. There was a lot of support, but this is just show Chinese. Of course, it's individual cases. It's not being implemented, but that's what's in record, in writing. You see, to show to some extent how Chinese intellectuals, still if you consider China with a billion people, how many people know that? How many reactions? There's no comparison. Yesterday, she mentioned a lot of polls. You see, in China, nobody did polls, the people's reaction. But this is still reflects, I believe, you see, Chinese general reaction, if we could think there exists any response to the Holocaust.
okay, when I call on you, please identify yourself first before you pose your question.
I have a question. What's the legacy of Jewish families who settled in China many years ago? Is the continuity of the family? How they similar in Chinese society in recent years?
And that's another real issue. You see, there were Jews from mid of 19th century to mid of 20th century. We mentioned Chinese law was open. Jews start to go to China. About 40,000 Jews who lived in China within 100 years. But unfortunately, very few become Chinese citizens. They mentioned the citizenship, the process, but very, very few, number one. Number two, and situation changed, including those refugees, 20,000 Jewish refugees from Central Europe come during the war. They are the first group to leave China because they why the life was saved and then survived the Holocaust, but the living standards different. The suffering. You read their memoirs, the books. They came to China because they didn't, not by choice, actually by no choice. You see, that's why after war, they were able to go to third country to meet their relatives or friends, go to a country, the culture, life they're familiar with, they went. And only those Jews who come here earlier established their business, families, they wanted to live, stay in China, but unfortunately, China involved in civil war, and shortly afterwards, communists took over. China carried totally different policy. Give you example, disencourage foreigners to live in China in the early 50s, 60s. Because Chinese communists do not know how to deal with the foreigners. They deal with Chinese, no problem, but the foreigners, so better you leave. It's not really, we say, kick them out, but the policy made them to leave because there's no way they could reestablish their business. If they couldn't make a living, how they can live in China? And of course, the last thousand number of Jews from Soviet Union really was in the 1963 to 62 to 63 because open dispute with Chinese communists and the Soviet Union communists. There were about 500,000 Russians still in Chinese territory in northeast part. Chinese government will kick them out. When they forced them to go back, there were about 1,000 Russian Jews who came during the war or before the war, had to leave. So that's put the end of what we say Jewish diaspora in modern China. So that's another topic. You see, if I could do advertising, yesterday I made a MOOC by Nanyang University, now officially on Coursera, that open online course available. So anyone could click the Coursera, and then I have a topic, Jewish diaspora in modern China. That's all in English. So
Always has a further project to do. You see, Barry, I mean, that's really great. We do Coursera at Santa Clara.
okay, yeah.
We work with Stanford.
Yesterday, so I received that link.
Yeah.
So
It's a fantastic program. Yes, sir. Identify yourself.
It's Javier, I'm a historian on the Holocaust Sorry. So, Shu, when you took me in 1994 to Sun Yat-sen 2 in Nanjing, we didn't know, you didn't, obviously didn't know about this.
already at that time already knew this.
You didn't tell us, but
Yeah, okay.
in my, I published an article a few years later on the survival of the Jews of Shanghai, mainly based on the Joint Archive. Well, as you know, from 37 to 39, Victor Sassoon and the Abraham family and some of the other Iraqi families financed the refugees. And then in 39, the Joint approved the financing, and from then on, they took it over. My guess, it's only speculation, is that probably the World Jewish
Yeah, you're right. You need to be further. But what I believe, by studying this very issue, we could understand not the history because it didn't get anywhere, as we said, fruitless, but shows Chinese how they look at Jews, what they want to do in specific time or including today. You see the attitudes. There's a lot of things we still can talk about by analyze this statement, then to see how Chinese perceive Jews or their culture. This is a problem more important than that, but that is a definite part of the history. With the communists, we just find that specific information, documents, paper report, which also happened to have a Jew there. And people know she was a Jew, and specifically elect her to that position. You see, which shows communists, though they were involved in the Civil War or anti-Japanese war, but they are not really had much contact with outside the world, but still cares that issue. The anti-fascist conference and mentioned frequently, because that's together with, you're right, with opinion or actions in Soviet Union. Because at that time, Chinese communists more or less follow what Russian communists did, you see, or what they said. But for this document, there were other things we could discuss about anti-fascists, any kind of meetings or actions, but this specifically because they mention specific, she is a Jewish woman and was persecuted. So that's how it comes. Yeah, this is another issue, you see, but still, if you look at, as a matter of fact, yesterday we got some documents from Beijing archive. You know, I was very happy to see with Beijing as a prime minister, because at the time, China started to change its attitude towards Israel. The real contact would be established, you see, between those that not open, under the table in the United Nations. But in 1979, the death, 2 years after death of Mao, China would start to change. So if you look at this, Chinese view about Israel, more or less the same as Sun Ke's proposal to this plan. There you could find the similarities and the links. You see, it is also very important why China want to get closer to Israel. There were other issues, but there were also practical issues.
Okay, yes, in the back.
Also Mordechai. I'm amazed that the enormous people, the Chinese people, with their enormous tradition and culture and science background, that they think that they can be helped by the Jews. That's a small, I mean, who would have thought? I mean, the Jews would only hope that
You're right. Actually, one thing I didn't mention because I know I did not have enough time. I'm glad you mentioned this because Chinese, by the time they came to know Jews, and one of the things they believe Jews was suffering people at that time. To give you example, Shalom Alechem's story appeared in beginning of 20th century, 1910. Top Chinese, later on become top Chinese modern writers, translated the book, introduced Jewish novel, they call Yiddish novel, but they said a new Jewish literature to Chinese readers. You see, as a matter of fact, before I came to Jerusalem, I stopped in Shanghai. I met Chinese scholar in Shanghai. They want to do something to commemorate centennial anniversary of death of Shalom Alechem, because in the beginning of 20th century, he was one of the best-known Western writers to Chinese literary circle. See, because of, you read Shalom Alechem's story, right? And other stories, Jews were suffering. You see, not powerful. You see, but that image into Chinese mind, they become very sympathetic to this group of people. Especially realize they have no land, no home. And I did not also mention Dr. Sun Yat-sen. In his speech, when he was alive, in his speech, he used Jews as inspiration to inspire Chinese, his followers, to make a revolution. You see, I give many times talk about Chinese or why Chinese are interested in Jews. Though I have specific things about this, but I don't really have time to discuss it.
Okay, one last question. Yes?
Yeah, well, exactly. Jews in Harbin was first under the rules of Japanese. Because when Japanese first invaded China, they first invaded in that part of the portion. You see, in the beginning of 20th century, when Russian Jews went to Harbin, because of the Tsar's expansion, they took a lot of Chinese land from northwest China, and that's why Jews were there. You see, then Japanese had a war with Russian 1904, 1905, and Russian was defeated. So Japanese start to influence there, and the Jews had much contact. There's, you can have a specific topic with the relationship between Jews in China and Japanese authority in China. You see, that's a relationship, relations is there, but that doesn't really cover to this response. You see, this topic has anything to do with this.
Okay, thank you. 15-minute break.